Welcome to Harvestworks. I'm Carol Parkinson, I'm the director. We really enjoy working with Volumetric on these great presentations that span many aspects of digital media. Harvestworks is a nonprofit organization, a digital media arts center. You can pick up our card. We have an education program in interactive technology. We also are the producers of the New York Electronic Art Festival. So I'm going to let Ellen Perlman introduce her presenters, and thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming tonight to Volumetric. And when you leave, if you don't mind, if you could rate us and tell us and say what a wonderful time you had, that would be really great. So tonight we have three great presenters, although I got a text from our last presenter, and I don't know what's up with that. So I hope we'll have three presenters. But we have really thought, it's really because of people like you who come here, who are also amazingly talented and creative and have so much to offer, that we have the Volumetric Society. It's free, it's composed of members, and I'm always open to new ideas, and I really want to know what you're doing. And that's what I like to present, is what you're doing, okay? So tonight we are having first Allison Berkoy. Did I say it right?
Everyone says Berkoy.
Okay,
Yeah.
Berkoy, who is an incredible artist, and that's all I'll say, and I'll let Allison talk and present her work, okay?
Hi. Ooh, good. Okay. Well, my name is Allison Berkoy, and I want to first thank Ellen so much for inviting me to give this talk, and to Harvestworks, and for all of you for checking it out and being here. So tonight I'll be talking about recent projects involving participatory multimedia installation environments. And as a large focus of the Volumetric Society is in the exploration of natural user interfaces within physical and digital volumetric environments, I'll focus on projects using some of these tools, specifically the Kinect hardware sensor and the open source software processing. In my recent past work, my work revolves around video and the projected image, multimedia sculpture and installation environments, reactive and interactive figures, and an expanded notion of performance. And the places where this work has existed ranges from traditional galleries to theaters to music venues to site-specific environments such as warehouses, a caboose, a boat. And when I speak of performance, I'm not only speaking of human actors. Often the only human actors in my performances are the unexpected ones on the stage, the audiences. My earliest reactive works began with remote controllable figures, using a very antiquated system of the IR remote control to trigger scripted DVDs in DVD Studio Pro, for those of you who know what that is all about. I used the remote control to wake up single figures as well as groups of figures in conversation, including a family protruding from a canvas and appearing to watch television, or its audience, in Push the Button. And this is from 2010.
I don't want to watch this anymore.
This is what's on.
The party.
Where's the remote? Where is the remote?
This is funny. Shut up.
Shut up.
So these figures remain asleep until a viewer wakes them up, and the push of a button calls up a program script that in turn triggers a randomized response. And a big reason for this earlier system, programming with scripted DVDs, was a strategy in affordability and portability, and the system needed very little maintenance. It was not dependent on a computer to run, but it was also very limiting. And so I began to shift to programming within an open source program that many of you know, processing, and with Arduino, which allows for physical inputs like pushing buttons or turning knobs, and outputs like spinning motors or video. And I began to fall down the very deep and beautiful rabbit hole of how computers and these open source tools can multiply possibilities from a simple form of reactivity to a more complicated kind of interactivity. And then there's this. And this is the Microsoft Kinect, which is a relatively inexpensive depth and motion sensor. And as most of you know, it's used for gaming, and it's really been a game changer for me as a platform enabling for another kind of work to happen. And it began to open up a lot of what I could do in terms of pushing relationships and boundaries and these hybrid forms crossing between installation, performance, and interactive objects. And along with processing, it's allowed me to further explore another kind of narrative telling. Stories that are not just nonlinear, but are broken and disrupted and unresolvable. Narratives of ambiguity and multiplicity, as life stories normally are and traditional storytelling usually avoids. So I want to introduce you to my company. And while I talk about all this great cutting-edge technology, I want to show you the first very crude sketch. In company, participants enter an environment suggesting the semblance of a living room. There's a couch and 2 chairs to sit in or not sit in, a framed picture on the wall containing a flattened 3-dimensional female figure sitting in a chair and enlivened through video projection. The scene within the frame, hanging from the wall, suggests a portal to another living room, a mirrored variant of the real living room on the guest's side. The figure makes requests of her guests and asks her to join her on the couch or in the chairs for strange and absurd stories. She discloses secrets and memories, sometimes quite uncomfortably so, and entertains. The figure responds differently to group gatherings of company, where she becomes more entertaining and turns the gathering into what feels more like a game, versus the company of a lone potential companion, where some stories can only be revealed one-on-one. The level of intimacy is adjusted to expected social dynamics. So this here is a prototype for company, but it's not the way it will look in its final form. So technically, the figure reacts to guests through multiple inputs coming in from the Kinect sensor, and I can track things such as guest location, and I like to use the word guest rather than user. Guest location, number of guests in the space, proximity of guests to each other, how slow they're moving, if they choose to sit or lay on the couch or get too close to the figure. And these triggers in turn trigger scripts that I've programmed in the software processing. And for those who are a little more techie on this, I'm using simple OpenNI, which is a wrapper for the software OpenNI. And anyway, so this in turn triggers a selection from a video databank of responses that then becomes projected onto the figure. And here's a screenshot of a single user detected within the Kinect's depth map on the left. And this triggers the video output on the right. Or I guess this is the left. And that's projected to the life-size figure within the canvas with the projector hidden from the participant's view. And this is the first programming map, and I'm going to skip through this a little bit, but just say that basically the whole idea behind this is a map of combining triggerable location zones with branching script pathways for randomized responses. So this is just a very basic sketch of a one-user prototype, but the brackets are all randomized array responses. So as a user, as a guest or a user comes into the space, then the figure might trigger 1 of 10 randomized ways of saying hello, and then 1 of 20 randomized ways of inviting the guest to the couch. And then if they go to the couch, then it will trigger 1 of 10 randomized commands, or it will trigger 1 of 10 randomized stories, and then if it selects story number 2, then it will start with story 2A, and then if they stay, then it will go to story 2B, but if they go, it will trigger another randomized array. So it's using a lot of simple ways to get this kind of increased illusion. But still, even with creating this kind of illusion, it's still, well, you'll see. So this is the first prototype using a physical stand-in and talking about how it will eventually look and behave. And this is testing its viewers to test out its own methods of interaction. So that's company. And while that continues in development, it's also become a technical and conceptual sandbox and a guide for other approaches that I've begun to construct in my current monster of a project called Untitled Apocalypse. And I want to show you so much from Untitled Apocalypse, but I'm going to focus here on the installations using the Kinect and Processing. Untitled Apocalypse is a live exhibition experience, as well as a film, which plays as a show within a show, and the image shown here is a still from the film. It previewed at the Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center in Troy, New York, otherwise known as MPAC. If you don't know MPAC, you should get to know MPAC because it's a really amazing space. And it was up there this past February, and I'm continuing to develop it for exhibition down here. And very quickly, just to give it some context, the exhibition of Untitled Apocalypse is a really large, immersive, and navigable exhibition environment. At MPAC, it was in a black box studio that was around 3,500 square feet and about ceilings 40 feet high, and contained 9 discrete installations for audiences to navigate within. There's no written instructions, and with the exception of ushers placed at the entrance and exit to the studio, there's no one standing around directing audience members for where to go or what to do. And instead, I really focused on subtle lighting and audio cues, directing guests through the space, the use of integrated partitions and natural barriers to keep people within the Kinect sensing spaces and at the correct viewing distances, and preventing guests from touching the installations. And as in the last example of company, one of my strategies is if you get too close to an installation, they might scream at you pretty wildly. So guests first enter the waiting room. The space measures about 20 by 20 feet, and the environment suggests something of a medical office or hospital waiting area with rows of chairs to wait in. And guests viewing the tableau from its front see a life-sized female figure at a desk with an antenna protruding from her chest, a flattened 3D perspective hanging in 3 planes, suspended about a foot from the ground with aircraft cable running 40 feet up to the grid. A television appears to hang beside her. Via a concealed Kinect sensor and concealed computer running processing, the receptionist makes requests of her guests, tells broken stories, and changes the channel on the television in what appears as an absurd kind of game. Guests are asked to come to the desk and are sharply reprimanded if they get too close. They're asked to sit and wait, and if they do, the stories begin to unravel. But what guests are waiting for is unclear, and the narratives hang in disrupted layers in parallel to its physical form. So here's a close-up of the receptionist's video face, projecting upon a mached mask of shredded office documents and a tangle of hair of stripped AV wires. And as guests move to the side, the panels appear as thick slices, and additional materials and equipment become exposed. Behind the desk, the receptionist holds shredded documents suspended in a piece of waste bucket. And like the figure from Company, the receptionist of the waiting room speaks in short segments and only divulges longer stories to those who follow her requests, to those who sit and wait with her, and stories only deepen for those who wait. And like in Company, the script was built as a series of randomized arrays, aiming for this increased illusion of interactivity. And the sensor-based interaction is meant to create a more tenuous relationship, and perhaps an intimate relationship with the figure, in the strange predicament of following orders from an inanimate object, and suggesting a really absurd game being played, but not quite knowing the rules. So after leaving the waiting room, viewers enter the large exhibition space and usually enter the observatory next. And this next piece also uses a Kinect and processing, and for now a more simple form of reactivity that continues in development.
Please step into the light, and I will tell you something. What can I tell you? Dear vast creature, you are the distance of 2 times around the earth if you lay out your blood vessels one by one. This also means that the distance between you and any other vast creature is at least the distance of 4 times around our planet. No wonder. What can I tell you? I will tell you this. When we are becoming born and preparing for our entrances, we give birth before we are birthed to 250,000 new neurons every minute. And every day, that's 360 million new points of transmissions for electricity and data and receptions. Perhaps there is hope in this. What can tell you? I will tell you this. There are as many pathways for data transmissions in our bodies than the number of stars in the universe. Perhaps there's hope in this. What can I tell you?
The last thing I'd like to touch on is the show within a show. The exhibition occurs in two main parts, installation mode and show mode. In installation mode, audiences navigate the installations as normal. At various and unexpected times, this is interrupted, and a cue is broadcast from processing from a server to the other computers in the room. And this is some of what happens.
Tonight's theme is the bad star. Now, for preview.
We don't know what we might discover, what the data will reveal.
And now for our double feature.
Every time I find him, not asleep, not awake. And in the morning, he would remember.
We're not all expected.
Well, I don't know. I'll just say I think I need to close out. But I was just going to say really quickly that's the the network part of the performance where, well, we can just talk about that in like later. So that's it.
Thank you. Too bad there's not a place to actually see this work right now, right? Anyone here wants to produce it?
Yeah, I'm looking for. There's some things up in the air, but nothing has solidified. So if you have suggestions on spaces, or money, or help, any of those things, definitely trying to get it here. So.
Great.
Close up.
Yeah, so we're just going to do a change for our next. So let's give Allison a round of applause. So, are you set up?
I think so.
Can someone get the light?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
How's it going? Thanks. My name's Don Undeen. That's all right. Thanks to the Volumetric Society for having me here. This is my first time as a volumetrician, so it's very exciting for me. And thanks to Ellen for inviting me, and thanks for Allison and Presenter Next for being my co-presenters today. So basically, I don't have cool stuff of my own to show. I'm sort of a, impresario, dilettante, encourager of really cool technology people to come into the Met and do interesting stuff with our collection. That's basically what I'm here. Is I hope that after today that some of you people choose to hook up with me later, and I'll tell you guys easy ways for that to happen, if you're interested in playing with our collection using your tool kits, whatever those might be. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on sort of how this whole idea for a Media Lab came about at the Met, so you can get a sense of sort of just how open we are to working with you guys with the things that you want to work on, right? So anyway, so get started. My name is Don Undeen. I'm the manager of the Media Lab at the Met. My Twitter handle is Don Undeen. My email address is don.undeen@metmuseum.org. I'm pretty easy to find. For starters, basically how all of this started was about a year and a half ago. The Met held its first ever 3D scanning and printing hackathon in partnership with MakerBot. It was the first time any museum had done any really major DIY 3D scanning thing. So we were excited about that. That basically came about because we were having conversations with MakerBot about how we could show off DIY 3D printing in the museum. We had just discovered 123D Catch, which had just come out, and when that happened, we realized that anybody could come into our museum with their own camera, take pictures of objects, turn those objects into models, and then do stuff with them with all these amazing 3D tools that were coming out at the time. So all of a sudden, all of our content was open for reuse, and we got really excited about that. So we held this hackathon with 30 artists. Basically, we wandered around the museum. By the way, who actually likes classical art? I mean, this is a technical art thing. All right, we don't. Okay, cool. I just sort of go into that assuming that everybody thinks the Met stuff is awesome, but not everyone feels that way. That's cool. So basically, what we did, we wandered around the museum. We met with curators who, did not know what 3D printing was, but they agreed to talk to these artists about objects in the collection that would be particularly amenable to photogrammetry. This thing, because you can get all the way around it, it's marble. It's really good for that sort of stuff. We took lots of pictures of the objects from all sides, which is what you have to do. Who here is familiar with software like 123D Catch, the concept of photogrammetry? Okay, cool. So I get to explain it. Awesome. So this is 123D Catch. It's sort of a cloud-based software. It's free. It's from Autodesk. It's not open source, but it is free. It's a cloud-based thing, so when they upgrade their servers, you don't really upgrade the software too much. You load in, say, this many pictures of an object from all sides, and you get this 3D model that comes out of it, which you can then hack on, print, model, turn into other stuff. Around this time and in the last year and a half since we did the hackathon, there's been a lot of new software that makes 3D modeling a lot easier. We're even teaching it to teenagers now. Oh wow, I left this in. So this is sort of what the video looks like. All this sort of comes right out of 123D Catch. It does the little what to see there. It's kind of nice. Next. Okay, great. So we spent 2 days in the space in the museum that the museum let us use, eating a bunch of food that MakerBot paid for, and hacking on these objects. Here's one of our artists. She is basically remodeling a helmet from our Arms and Armor collection. We had 8 printers from MakerBot, which is very nice because printing is slow. If you guys haven't seen a 3D printer in action, it's not gonna replace merchandise in stores anytime really soon because it's not so fast. We were printing not just replicating objects but doing mashups. So people were taking 2 objects and sort of mashing their heads together. We're doing things like this, which are kind of whimsical, where you take Leda and the Swan and Marsyas and create Leda and the Marsyas. You can again, Marcius a real popular guy. Marcius and Luisa Detti, all from our European Sculpture and Decorative Arts collection, and making this sort of Emperor Palpatine kind of guy there, which I like a lot. Oh, and that image is not printed, right? That's a digital file from digitally rendered. That's why it looks so nice. Took this Durga sculpture in our Asian collection. Was Durga is a goddess, so she's a many-armed sort of goddess, and her arms had been lost over time, so she was recreated with all of her arms in this puppet form by Annie Fresh, who's a Muppet puppeteer. She was a participant there. So a lot of the stuff was whimsical and fun, but it was a great way for us to show in the museum how this stuff is done. All these objects ended up on the website called Thingiverse. Thingiverse is sort of a Flickr for 3D models. If you go to thingiverse.com/met, we've got about 37 objects up there now, and we're slowly adding more. All these objects are free for reuse. You can download the digital files and make new stuff. The neat thing about Thingiverse is you can upload objects and sort of declare that they're remixes of previous objects. So we're really sort of embracing remix culture with this whole movement to show that our content is not just for looking at and learning about, where it came from, which is great, but also sort of engaging with that history of the object and the shape of it and whatever appeals to you about these things, that all these objects can be taken home, reused. Like this is all of our world's culture, and the Met wants to be sort of a dynamic participant in that culture, which includes these days, making 3D remixes, putting it into Unity and building environments that are populated with these kinds of objects. There's all sorts of uses this stuff can be put to. Since the hackathon happened, this is stuff that's sort of happened over the last year. Somebody made a Pez dispenser. This object on the right showed up at the Bruce High Quality Institute's university. Bruce High Quality University, right? They did an art show of all 3D printed works, and I went there and I started to see some Met objects actually appearing in these shows. So it was really neat to see, this collection that we helped to sort of unlock to the world in this way, showing up in other people's contemporary work. This down below is an accordion book by Tom Burtonwood, which is in front of me here. If you guys can come take a look at afterwards too. It's one of my favorites because it's basically impressions and an outpression? Mold, there you go. Relief. Thank you. The art guy in the background. I work in an art museum. Good job, Don. So you can make molds and impressions with this stuff, and it's pieces from a variety of museums around the world. So it's sort of like almost like a sample book of art 3D printed, which I think is a lot of fun. So basically, after this hackathon, we kind of realized that where the MediaLab can really operate is this interesting intersection between the Met and our collection and our expertise, the creative technology community, all these people who would go into a museum and they want to think, oh, I want to do something with that, or I want to learn how that was done. People who don't just think, oh, that's interesting, take a picture and move on. People who really want to engage with this culture because it's their culture too, right? And the tech industry, right? MakerBot participated in this hackathon. They funded all this stuff. It was good for them. They got good press, and we were able to sort of bring them to the table and make this sort of thing happen. And that was really exciting for me. And so since then, this is kind of where the MediaLab is sort of operating right now. Like, we don't really get anything done unless there's an outside person who wants to do some interesting project. And there's some component of the collection or staff or expertise that wants to talk to them about that project. And usually, but not always, when necessary, someone from the tech industry who wants to play a part, provide gear or space or expertise or time. MakerBot was a good partner. 3D Systems has been a nice partner lately. They're going to give me one of those scanners. Yeah, I'm super excited. So this is kind of the area that we're operating in, and we want to invite you guys to be on that community side. And if any of you guys work in the tech industry, let's talk about that too. And if you guys work in other museums, we are trying to do this in a very pan museum sort of way. It's not really exclusively about the Met, although that's where I work and that's the place I like the best. So what makes the Met neat is that we have an encyclopedic collection, right? We have cool stuff. If you guys who has been at the Met in the last 6 months? Anybody been there? Oh wow, that's awesome. So you guys know, right? We have stuff from I guess as far as like 30,000 years old. Like we've got some rocks. And all the way up to contemporary art from like every corner of the globe. No, our rock collection is awesome. And we don't have Transformers. Sorry, I just threw that in there to see if anybody was noticing. But we have lots of cool stuff, right? And all of these forms, just on a purely physical level, still speak to us. They're all really impactful. They all can influence the kind of work that you're doing, that we all do today. And we want to find better ways to make this content and the information about it accessible to people doing contemporary work, because it's all the same flow. We also have really cool staff. There's an interesting website actually, and it's been inspiring for a lot of digital artists in ways I didn't expect, called Connections on our website. It's basically a variety of Met staff talking about aspects of the collection that are interesting to them, and it's not art history curatorial, it's very personal. One of our staff, an educator, did a piece about smiles, the history of smiles in art, and she's a big smiler. It was a really moving piece. Some of our creative technologists got really inspired by this, and now they're doing this whole information visualization data project on the history of smiles. I'm using sort of objects in our collection as a component of that, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit because we got something coming up. We've been doing lots of partnerships with schools lately. We're working with our Access program to explore issues of access technology in art museums, because we realize that people who have disabilities often are using some really advanced tech. So figuring out how to get their really cool tech to work with our interactives, work in our spaces, is a really important thing. We've been, things like revamping the website for the blind. Notice there's no images on there, but really good verbal descriptions and things like that. Eye tracking software for people who are mobility impaired. Wayfinding tools for people who want to figure out how to get from point A to B to C and avoid all the loud rooms, or all the rooms, with stairs, right? Or if you're a prude, you can avoid all the rooms with butts. Tactile works, right? Developing modular software to make touchable paintings, where people who, particularly people with not so much the blind, even I learned that our blind tester for this wasn't nearly as interested as our visitors with dementia were really interested in tactile works as ways of engaging with their family and friends and the art itself, even more so than the blind, which I thought was very interesting. So learning. One of the things I've gotten pretty good at is like bringing in digital artists, finding out what they're interested in, and hooking them up with curators to have conversations. We found that an artist might have a really strong idea about what interests them in a collection, but also a talk with a curator or an expert really starts to change their whole approach to how they want to tackle their own contemporary work. And I think that is really cool. We're working on a projection mapping project to project the original colors onto the Temple of Dender, with a couple interns meeting with the curator on a regular basis to figure out what the original colors were. So the Temple of Dender is this big sandstone temple in the museum. It was all painted these bright colors originally. We don't know what they were, but we're doing scholarship on it, and this is a way for us to express that scholarship and learn more about it and create a good environment for sharing that information. We spoke at Maker Faire with this basically the thesis being, everything in the museum is made by makers. What do you want to make at the Met, right? Inviting people in to share in our space, share our objects with them so that they can participate in making as well. So we're looking at having makers in residence, people who are really trying to share not just this is what these things look like, but this is how they were made and how you can participate in a hands-on way with our collection. Now this is my big ask, right? So we started a meetup called the New York City Museum MediaLab Meetup. Guaranteed not to ever compete with the Volumetric Society's meetups. You'll recognize us by the unicorn with the rainbow horn. This is basically the purpose of the meetup is kind of like everything I said. It's sort of a clearinghouse for people who are creative technologists, have interesting ideas, and want to get access to something in a museum like the Met to help them with their work. So if you've got an art project that touches on a major art museum's collection, this is a place where you can go to help get those resources to make that happen. One of the things we've got coming up this Saturday, I was talking about this Smiles project a minute ago. We're going to have a day-long hack day in the Met in our MediaLab space on this Saturday from noon to 6. We're looking for anybody who's great data viz or coder or computer vision, facial recognition. Basically what we've got is we've got a good set of data where the images are known to have smiles in the painting, and we know where the smiles are in that work. It might not be a painting, it might be a sculpture too. And so on Saturday we're going to play with all of that data. So if that's the kind of thing that appeals to any of you guys, then you're my type of people and you should come. And even if it says sold out, don't worry about it, because we got room. So basically the way the meetup works is, we started out, we had a bunch of, I'm calling all these creative coders who want to do this stuff for fun, and we're calling them unicorns, for want of a better word, because people said you didn't exist, but I believe that you're real. And we literally just write on a big whiteboard who we are, what we're into, and then what kind of projects we would like to see happen related to technology and a museum, and then people just start throwing their names on it, and we start pulling these things together to figure out what we can offer to help make that happen. We've done glass presentations. We're working on some Google Glass projects. We've done just ideation, right? Sometimes people come with ideas that aren't really fully formed, so we've done design thinking workshops to help people sort of gel their ideas into something that's workable. We've done fun things that don't really seem to have any sort of pedagogical art history value, but are still awesome, like putting lips on paintings and making them talk. We recently went to the Museum of Art and Design for for behind-the-scenes look at their 3D art show. So this is, I don't know if you can see in the light here, but you can see in this picture. So that's a blue hippo. If you guys are familiar with the Met hippopotamus William, he is this he's this hippopotamus. He's Egyptian. He's old. He's made out of this material called faience. Faience is sort of one of the first ceramics. It's interesting because when you mold it and you fire it, and it starts out white and it turns this lovely shade of blue. These are some researchers from the UK who are trying to figure out how to make 3D printed ceramics using a powder printer that lays down layers of powder and glue to sort of hold it all together. They're trying traditional ceramics, and they found out that when they would print this stuff up, glue it all together, and then they would fire it, the glue would burn off and the object would disintegrate before it would fuse. So they did a lot of research into the history of pottery and ceramics, and they found out that what really worked was Egyptian faience. So, and they did this sort of in consultation with some of the conservators at the Met as well. So basically, this is a 3D printed hippo made with ancient Egyptian faience material, and this is a scan from the eraser version of William. So we went from high art to low art back up to medium art, which I'm really, really a big fan of. So we're also doing some digital copyist stuff. We've been, so there's, if you guys have ever been in a museum and you see someone with an easel, right, and they're standing in front of a painting and they're copying it, that's so that the museum can have backups in case we lose that first one. Not really. That's a little art joke there, guys. Well, so we thought, well, what would that mean in a digital world? What would a copyist program look like? This is Corey Archangel's Super Mario Clouds. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but basically, Corey is a contemporary artist. He took a Super Mario Brothers cartridge, hacked it, took it apart, pulled out the program chip, not the character chip. For those that know about that sort of stuff, that's an interesting piece of information. Yeah, so he reprogrammed it, put it all back together, and he basically, when you play it, it's Super Mario Brothers with nothing but the sky and the clouds, and that's it. It just goes like that. Very compelling art. We but the interesting thing is he put all the instructions on how to do it online. So Jonathan Dehan here is one of our developers. He basically recreated it, and we made several versions of it, and we're going to be setting up at iBeam a workshop to sort of run through with a large group of people, everyone getting to make their own piece of contemporary art based on these instructions, hopefully with a visit from Corey and contemporary art conservators and curators to really talk about what it means to recreate a digital work. And in the land of like cut and paste and copying, what does it mean to sort of go through those same processes that he went through? So we think that's pretty interesting too. This is roughly our physical space. It's not that fancy. It's a little bit fancier than it is in those pictures because I took them a week ago. We're sort of adding new stuff all the time as we get it. You'll notice that it's empty, so it's ready to be populated by you. I think that what I'm really trying to get to is sort of a critical mass of people who want to spend time in this space. And basically, the way I have been working it is if someone has a clever idea for something that they want to do with our collection, they come in, we have a little consultation, I suppose, talk about what they want to do, fill out a tiny little form, and they get a volunteer badge. The volunteer badge has got their picture on it. It looks just like my badge, and it lets them sort of come and go as they please in the museum as long as you don't have a record. And you can come and go as you like and occupy this space, use the stations, and the museum is right below your feet. So if you're interested in the collection and doing stuff with it, it's a nice quiet space to work and be around other cool creative people doing interesting stuff. So I hope that some of you guys find that to be an interesting proposition and want to spend some time with us. There's lots of interesting opportunities that are just barely being explored in the museum. We have got these amazing period rooms, right? They're these fully in the round, three-dimensional spaces filled with glorious furniture. They all kind of look dead. The chairs are empty because you can't sit in them. The tables don't have any food on them because that's gross. So they just look very unlived in. And so our departments, the American Wing, European Sculpture and Decorative Arts, who have these period rooms, very interested in figuring out how to liven them up. I can think of few people who know better how to liven up a three-dimensional space than the people in this room right now. So just throwing it out there. Additionally, this is our roof garden in the lower right, a space on the top of the museum. You have this amazing view of the city. There's in the summertime it's open with these usually these large format sculptures. Some really interesting possibilities there in terms of augmented reality, geolocation. You're surrounded by the skyline of the city and the park. I think that I don't really have to tell you guys what the opportunities might be in a space like that, but there's some neat stuff going on. In addition, we have a really large and confusing space. It's like a giant Pac-Man game in terms of just the size of it, the maze-like quality, the different characteristics of these different areas for someone who's interested in navigating complicated spaces. And I don't even necessarily mean in a practical way, but in a get lost kind of way. I think there's some really cool potential there. These are just the things that I thought of when I was putting this together, when I was thinking about volumetric and three-dimensional spaces and things like that. But it's a big place, and there's lots of really interesting stuff that I think is worth checking out by anybody who wants to interact with confusing spaces full of amazing cultural heritage. So that's really my pitch. I'm hoping that some of you guys are going to, choose to check us out either on the New York City Museum MediaLab Meetup. I think if you go to meetup.com and you search for museum, I think it's the first one that comes up. Or drop me a line at my Twitter handle or my email address, or take my card before we're done. Because I'm just here to reach out to all of you guys and let you know that we're here. The museum is here, and we'd really like to be as involved as we can in a conversation between, and amongst members of all the history of human culture. So concludes my presentation.
Now, Sean Kean, for those of you who know, started the Volumetric Society, without which we wouldn't all be here. And Sean has moved on to work on a company called the Voxiebox. And I'm going to let him explain to you what that is all about.
Great, thanks for that great introduction, Ellen. A round of applause for Ellen, who's been doing a great job with this group. This is maybe the 9th event this fall or something, and she's just cruising on it. When I was doing it, we started off, we only had maybe one a month if we were lucky, and never as organized and well attended as this. So thank you so much, Ellen. Yeah, all right. So I'm here going to show you some exclusive new video, never been seen on the web or anywhere before, of the latest prototype of the Voxiebox, which will be the world's first holographic gaming system. And you could use it for other stuff too. So I'm just going to show you some things that are more gaming oriented, and then the really exciting part about it is what will people do with the engine itself. We'll be making it available so you could do an installation that uses the technology. Whatever it is you might need to do, we'll be having a non-game oriented offering that could be great for arts, for museums, for anything. You can find some video and photos and what have you on Facebook. Facebook.com/Voxiebox. And yeah, this is our big logo. Very one-dimensional. So this project started off at the Volumetric Society. It was one of the earliest meetings. It was February 24th, 2011. This is me. And this guy, Alan, he actually made it. It was back earlier in the days, much less organized. Anyone could come on and just say that they wanted to have a meetup. You could just plan if you wanted a project or whatever it is. So actually, Alan went, I believe, and he said, "I want to do a project using the Kinect." He made an event, and so we had a group of people who came, and it was just one of these casual things where we were all trying to figure out what was going on with the Kinect, which is how the group really started, answering each other's questions, sharing some projects. Alan had actually come because he wanted to create a hamburger making robot. He wanted to automate the fast food industry and use the Kinect for machine vision. Actually, the Kinect is used a lot with robots and machine vision, so that he could sense where the buns were and the hamburgers, and it's pretty interesting. Alan's an inventor, and he's been doing really interesting things for many years. So that's what he wanted to do. I had actually just come back from a conference on human-computer interaction, talking about the Kinect on stage, and handling a Kinect thing, whatever. Okay, and I was at the end with someone at Microsoft, and people were talking about, well, what is the next thing for the Kinect? And what I ended up saying is, well, we really need a display that's beyond the 2 dimensions to complement the Kinect, which is a 3D camera, so to speak, or a holographic camera. So the next big thing that we really need, the next disruptive thing that could be as amazing as the Kinect, would be a display that could break into the next dimension. So I came back to New York. I was down in Florida, and I came back, and it was just the next day that Alan had made this meetup, and I just told that little story. And Alan said, "Oh, I know how to do that. I can make that." And I'd never met him before. I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah." And he said, "Oh, yeah, I did it back in the 80s for the New York Hall of Science." He created something called the quantum atom display, and it was installed in the New York Hall of Science in 1988. And it was using this novel technique which he had come up with to project light in air. And the way in which it works, and the way in which we're doing it now, is that there'd be a screen that would move up and down very quickly, and it would be projected on, and based on what height it was, a different slice of imagery would be shown in that space. So what you end up with, through persistence of vision, is a volume of light. And I said, "Oh, well, that's amazing. Like, this was 1988. It was like $40,000 for this to be done back then. It was very low resolution. And it actually just had an interactive model of the hydrogen atom that you could push a button and it would go to the next electron states." Had anyone ever seen that at the Hall of Science? No? Okay. It was there. It was there actually up until like a couple of years ago. It had lasted decades. So I said, all right, well, let's revisit that. Maybe we can do that using new technology. Maybe there's new projectors that we could use. We've got the Kinect that can create this kind of 3D data really easily. Wouldn't it be great to create like the world's first, Kinect-like television, to create a holographic TV? So we got started working on this, and let's see, what's next? And ended up actually getting invited here, I'll go back to this. To something called, well, wait, let me tell you. That video is from after this, but anyway, so we started hang out and trying to figure out how to do some things. I'll show you what we ended up doing. So this is an early version, and you can see a screen moving up and down, and light being projected onto it. And that is a mastodon, an old mammoth. It's a mammoth. It's a mammoth skeleton. As you can see, it's very shaky, it's wobbly, it's not moving, it's not aligned right. But this is our sort of like proof of concept that we could do it. And actually this is about 8 inches cubed or so it's pretty big. And it was going at about maybe like 8 frames per second, sort of, or 8 hertz it was going up and down. And we showed a video that was earlier than this to Microsoft when they were doing this thing called the Microsoft Accelerator for Kinect, powered by Techstars Seattle 2012, which is that's its whole name. It's supposed to be used. So we got invited to be a part of this incubator program with a bunch of companies who were building companies using the Kinect. A couple companies doing 3D scanning. Actually, where is it? Called ManCTL. We used to use earlier on in the Meetup as one of the, they had created the software called RGB Demo, and it was the first application that came out that was really, really easy to plug into your computer, and plug the Kinect in, and start capturing 3D data. You could start scanning rooms, and so they ended up sitting next to us at this thing, and they just got acquired by the company that is doing the Kinect scanner for your iPad? Has anyone seen that Kickstarter project?
Structure sensor.
Structure, yeah, which is by, I forget what the...
Sense?
Yeah, well, anyway, they're working for that same company now, because they had created this really nice software that complements that scanner. Yeah, so this scanner is really neat. It hooks to your iPad. It's something we've been like dreaming of having in the Kinect, world in a long time. So it's great that's actually happening. So they were one of the companies here. A bunch of other ones doing great stuff, scanning like clothing fitting, medical use, all sorts of stuff. And so we were these kind of odd ones out because we weren't actually using the Kinect. We were creating this thing that could be used with the Kinect, but it was like building our own Kinect. These companies were all building software essentially on top of this hardware, but we were building hardware. And we were in these like nice offices in Seattle, and it's Microsoft land, it's very corporate, they're very nice people, it's a great program, and they were very gracious. They actually gave us full access to their hardware development research lab, which is amazing. So just wonderful, wonderful stuff. But we were sort of these odd ones out with like hacksaws, like in the office, like trying to make the next prototype and like drilling and like, all this kind of crazy stuff. And for the most part, we didn't have a product the whole time. So it was this 3-month program. It follows the Techstars model. If you like know about the startup community, Techstars is like a incubator, I guess around the world now, where you're given 3 months. You get invited to come in if you're a company. And the first month you work on, I forgot, I used to have the spiel down. Let's see, the first month is a mentor whiplash. So we saw like 5 mentors a day for like 3 weeks. And they're just coming and like giving you feedback on your ideas, saying, oh, you could do this, or that's terrible, or whatever it was. So yeah, that's the first month. And the second month is that you build stuff that, you iterate based on what you hear. And the last month is working on your pitch. And the whole thing culminates in a presentation in front of investors. And so that's this Techstars model. So this is actually the first time that Techstars had worked with the company, Microsoft, to create a powered by sort of a company-based, basically an incubator around a product or around a service or something. So that was really wild. We were all in this kind of experiment. And we had a prototype that we had gone there with. We flew there. We basically had to pack up basically all of like Alan's hardware and all this stuff. Alan couldn't be here tonight, and neither could our new prototype, which actually there's so many people here you would have never been able to see it really anyway. But I wanted to bring the new one. It'll be at a next meetup later on. But he couldn't be here, but he's here in New York area. But we're all packing up with these like bags. We've shown earlier prototypes before. You may remember that we would come with like duffel bags and duffel bags full of like really heavy stuff. So we lugged that on an airplane and broke the prototype that we had on the way, which we were there to build the next one anyway because we got a bit of money from it. So we were going to upgrade everything from like a We were gonna build a new one, but we basically were gonna bring this one that we had so that we could go through that mentor whiplash process and have something to show, like, oh, this is what we have now. We'll be doing this. So we had nothing, and we had nothing. So it was really embarrassing. I'm trying to give you this is the progression of this whole project, and basically people didn't believe that we could do it. They thought that we were bullshitting the whole thing. And we're like, no, it's really possible. We didn't think it was possible. We were told that even if it did work, or once we got earlier versions working, that by people who worked on Atari, worked on Xbox and whatever, they were just like, no one will ever want to play a game on this thing. It's not going to be fast enough. It's not going to be high enough resolution. It's not going to be all these kinds of metrics. No way was it ever going to be interesting. We're like, all right, we don't really care. So we found out, actually, after we ended the program, that there was a group in Adelaide, Australia, basically doing the same thing. And at the first, we're sort of like, oh no, they're doing our thing. And then it kind of sunk in, this is actually really, really hard stuff. It's a lot of mechanical engineering. It's a lot of computer engineering. It's a lot of very obscure hardware. To be able to project at this proper speed, you need to go at thousands of frames per second, which a regular projector goes at 30 or maybe 60. Actually, if I'm running on this isn't interesting, let me know. But the way in which these high-speed projectors work is sort of the way that your regular projector works here. To get all the colors, maybe 1 million colors, it's actually moving at very high speeds to give you little pieces of lower colored images that blend together for you. So if you ever take a projector and you wave your hand in front of it, you might see a rainbow. Anyone ever see that kind of weird effect? That's all the different little bit frames that are being spread out spatially, but when they're smushed together, you get all these millions of colors. But if you separate them out, I'm sure there's some sort of physical analogy for separating out colors and layers. But anyway, so that's what we're leveraging is this special projectors that go back and let us access those individual bit frames, they're called, so that we can actually write different shapes onto them. Ooh, sorry. So anyway, this is Will and Gavin, who have been working as well for actually a long time, also in their basements, essentially, as a side project, casual, hacksaws. They had actually made their display that I'm going to show next. The earlier version of it, instead of reciprocating up and down, they were spinning a helix-like structure, or basically a bent screw, and they were projecting from above onto it. They had carved their earliest one out of a yam, which worked really well. That's the kind of speed that we're at, and that we've always been actually. So this is kind of the roots of it. It's very, very high tech in the lowest tech ways. So these guys are great. So instead of being oh no, we've got this competition, which was all right, we're oh my god, wait, we actually have 2 other people in the world that we could talk about this stuff with. That's great because it's really nerdy. And then we could help each other out. So we had a Skype and we just fell in love with them immediately. They're really great guys. They've been best friends for a long time. And so we decided to merge together. And this is the helix thing that they had made, which is kind of cool. And they had made this whole the sound to this too. I don't know if it's whatever. But they call it don't worry about it. They call it the holodome. And so they got this chest going. They're British, they use British words, which is kind of, that's fun. TIE fighters and whatever, skulls and things. We had a skeleton, they have the outside of an elephant. So there's actually many, many different ways to sort of try and put light in air or in space. There's other projectors the last commercial projector, instead of projecting up and down or spinning on helix, it was actually a spinning, if you took a tennis racket and you spun it like this, and then they had these projectors that would spin with it, and it was $100,000. So just to give you an idea of where these were, I think they eventually went down to $30,000. There was another one that instead of actually having moving parts, would just rapidly switch LCD shutters, and that was $60,000. So this stuff has been completely inaccessible to anybody other than like military or research or deep oil drilling, and basically nobody. Nobody. There's never really been much of a commercial success. No vendor has really ever sold more than 20 or 30 or something like that. So our whole sort of thing, yeah, these guys are great. Our whole kind of thing was like, let's try and reduce this, to a more accessible level. Let's try and do like what MakerBot did with 3D printing. $50,000 printers. Now let's make them, $1,000 or what have you. So that's always kind of been in the back of our mind. It unfortunately is still really expensive, but it's not $100,000. So that's them. So we came together to make our company Voxon. So that's Alan and I, and that's Will and Gavin, and then we have David in Pittsburgh, who's an industrial designer, and Ken, who's in Providence. Does anyone remember Duke Nukem?
Yeah.
So Ken Silverman wrote Duke Nukem's build engine, which is the actual 3D engine that runs that game, and as well as the editor to make it. He created something called Ken's Labyrinth. Does anyone remember that? That kind of pushes way back. Ken's Labyrinth was a clone of Castle Wolfenstein, but instead of like shooting Nazis, you were just like throwing balls into. It was like kindergarten version, very benign, really nice. So he created the second first-person shooter when he was like 16, and then he got hired by the company that made Duke Nukem to go down to Texas to build out. Basically, this is the dawn of the first-person 3D shooter computer game era. So we sent him a mail after we had one of these videos, and said, hey, because he had gone on to create something called VoxLab, which is the sort of like golden master voxel-based gaming engine that people have based things like, not necessarily, but things like Minecraft or Ace of Spades or these other kind of games that work with blocky type of computer graphics, which is sort of all the rage now. Ken Silverman wrote the definitive sort of like spec for that. So I just sort of reached out to him and said, hey, you might be interested in, this on that. And he said, yeah, sure, come up and show me something. And this is early on when both these two Australian and New York teams had been working together. So Alan had gotten his latest hardware, and the Australians had their latest software drivers together. And we had never put them together onto the new software until we're sitting in Ken's office at Brown University, and we had it on the table, and just like hope and a prayer, and it worked flawlessly, which is amazing. And he's like, this is really great. Wow, okay, I want to start making stuff for it, and whatever it is, like, let me have one of these things. And so we gave him a device, and he is in the process of joining the company fully. But he created our engine, started creating these games, and was really excited. So that's great. So which leads into, we have a development kit that's going to be coming out. So there's a link at the end if you're interested in developing for this. Right now it's on Windows and it's C-based, but you can actually start writing for this stuff, which I'll show you why that would be interesting soon. Okay, so that's Ken, that's David, and this is what we showed actually this spring at New York Tech Day, this form factor. And inside here is where you would look to see this holographic type of stuff. And what you would see is, or what we were trying to get towards is games. So Tetris in 3D we showed. It was actually fully playable. I'm sorry, this is a bad photograph, and this is a still picture, not a video. But we wanted to really we wanted to prove that guy wrong back in the Microsoft land, that you could actually play a game with this type of display technology. It was really fun, and a huge thing that what we weren't able to do before, which really makes the gaming possible, is that we got it up to 20 hertz, or around 20 frames per second. The difference between 10 or 8 and 20 is just huge. And 20 is actually really exciting, and you can feel that low latency reaction that's good enough to play games. So we actually had Tetris, we had Space Wars, sort of a clone of Pac-Man, some other things. And it was only a monochrome. So what we've actually worked towards now since then is getting things in color, such as chess. So this is very recent. This is in the past couple weeks. And this is never before seen yet. And this is what it looks like. It's so hard to show. What? No, there's no sound. It's so hard to show this stuff in 2 dimensions because it just looks like I don't know what it looks. I don't know. It doesn't look like. I'm not really sure what it looks like. It looks like computer graphics or something like that. But this is a camera moving around the device here, and with your plain eyes without glasses, everybody who is around it or looking at it sees 3D objects in space. Chess pieces. This is a computer playing a computer. It's not a famous match or anything like that. But here you can see we've got colors, basic colors, which fit a certain aesthetic, and you can see that it's low resolution vertically. And this is still with this projector it's from last year or so. What we're moving towards this winter is a projector that can do basically 8 times everything that this one can. So 8 times the brightness, multiples of what this is. So it's going to be much, much brighter, 8 times the brightness. It's going to be like 30% more resolution this way. It's going to double the depth resolution this way. It's got other great things, and we'll be working on multiples of that to basically create fantastic systems. So that's chess, and what I'm personally really excited about is this game Voxitron. So this game was actually created by this New Zealandish, I don't know whatever, a person from New Zealand living in Japan, actually, and he was inspired by the game Robotron. He's an indie game developer. The game Robotron, you use 2 joysticks, and you have to like save the family from robots. And like when you use, this is to move, and this is the direction you shoot. And really fun. It was one of the first sort of 2 joystick arcade games. So he was inspired by that, but wanted to do a 3D version, and he wanted to keep it really, really simple. His early version was like, he wanted to create a game grid that was 64 voxels or blocks by 64 by 16. This really minimal, reduced game environment. He ended up wanting to make it bigger. So the resolution of this whole world, actually the whole game takes place, even the scoreboards and everything, is 128 by 128 by 64 blocks. You could think of them as pixels, but 3D pixels are somewhat like, they're called voxels, or volume picture elements. And they're represented here as cubes, and so you can feel that cubiness. So it's like Minecraft, but more like Lego. It's different because it's not a perspective like a first-person shooter out into the world. You're looking at this little world. And he had designed this game, he'd been working on it for a couple of years, with the idea that one day a display like ours would be available that it could play on. It didn't exist yet, really, or wasn't accessible yet. You know, he knew of these research ones. So I've been working on this, and it's a work in progress, but for the first time I can show an early shoot, very early, but again, hard to see what the heck you're looking at here, but that's lava on the bottom. These are giant like space monsters that are shooting. It's a still volume picture. They're shooting at you in the middle. And as you can see, it's like these, it's really hard to explain. There's like these sticks coming up. It's a physical world, but it's completely digital. So again, it's very hard to show on here. But it's real, so it's coming along, and this will soon be playable. The device that we were going to bring today, I actually had an animated mock-up of it, but it's not here. So I don't have video of it because we just got it working the last couple of days. So, and I have some more videos I can share. So that's what's coming, and more videos. Thank you. And if you're interested in SDK or anything like that, this is a way to is to like fill out a form. It's bit.ly, bit.ly. Should have made that bigger. /VXBX Voxiebox SDK. Again, we're on Facebook, and my email address is sean@voxon.co. And how are we doing on time? I can show just some quick videos.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll just flip through some videos. See, now does it feel more 3D? I don't know, like it's a real camera, you know? It's not computer generated. This is a calibration system. So you know about like keystoning with projectors? You can like figure out if it looks like if it's off. We basically have to do this in real, like a volume of 3D space. So we have to do these alignments. This is another level of Voxitron. What we're realizing is not everything is going to look good using this type of display. Really, it's probably going to lend itself best to simple graphics and really sort of retro kind of things. We think if there's a product to kind of come from this, It's going to be like a retro arcade system that really just lets you play Frogger in 3D. Nothing more advanced that would, where things would start to deteriorate. As you can see, it's transparent. It actually looks better in person, but everything kind of starts to blend together at a certain point, depending. There's some more of that. But what's really interesting, and what I'm looking forward to, is to see, again, we've been focused on gaming, what people might want to do just artistically or creatively or whatever, just hacking around with the SDK, and we'll be making a device available here in New York City that people can test out with. Oh, there's also a simulator with the SDK, so you don't need the device with you. You can actually see how it would look, and you can rotate it. Yeah. There's more color. Dancing guy.
Is that a programmed person?
No, these are converted from like 3D Studio Max or like OBJ files. This is a still image, actually going back to like 3D printing or artifacts or what have you. So we can just take an artifact, like a 3D printer file, and put it on here. This is a bicycle. You can zoom into it. You can see all the gears and stuff. Again, hard to show in 2D. This is a race car. So we do color. Color is kind of like weird and interesting, but you can see that there is different colors, which is a really big break from when we just started with monochrome. We were really just doing green before. And if you look on the net and you search for volumetric displays, you'll find a lot of monochrome. So to get color is a big step for us. Oh, this is a skeleton. So one big application of this kind of stuff would be in volume imaging, so MRIs, CAT scans, to be able to actually see them and to do slice throughs to look for tumors. Which again, it's a different market. That's where these other companies had gone, but we were really excited about gaming and creative stuff. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for your time, and feel free to come up and.
So we have about a half hour, and I know all of you want to talk to Allison, Don, and Sean. So do you want to just break out and talk, or do you want to have them come up here and answer questions? Yeah, all right. So Allison and Don can come up, and you can. Oh, okay. So who has the first question?
My name's Mandy Morrison. I'm a video and interdisciplinary person in performance too, so I'm interested in what all of you are involved in. And Don, I was curious as to, with the Met's use of the Whitney, are they going to be opening that up to the bigger and better?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So those that don't know, the Met is taking over the Whitney building because the Whitney Museum is moving. So there's definitely lots of ideas about what kinds of things are in development. I don't think it's a big secret that the Met will be using a lot of that space to continue to represent contemporary art and its contemporary art collection. It's an interesting question because and even in my own mind, part of me really covets these lovely spaces that are very reconfigurable, and oh man, I really want to have a public lab space with hands-on interactive experimentation with the collection. But it's an interesting question because so there's contemporary art, right? And there's contemporary digital art, and there's contemporary interactive digital art, and then there's interpretive interpretations of traditional art, and then there's sort of this experimental approaches to interpretation and of traditional art, and the MediaLab operates in this weird little area. So, for example, you can go into a period room in the American Wing and see a touch screen, and you know that you're looking at a piece of digital interpretation of the art. This is the interpretation, and that's the art, right? You can go into a contemporary art museum, some really amazing, digital thing going on a screen, and okay, that's the art. When you start, and you'll notice in our contemporary section of the museum, there's nothing there's no interpretive digital stuff going on, because there's this weird like blurring of the lines, which I think is really cool. But the idea is that if you had a MediaLab space in sort of a contemporary, sectioned off contemporary art thing, you might lose the opportunity to have that kind of creative technology engagement with the non-contemporary part of the collection. So yeah, no, it's really interesting, and I know there's a lot of talk about experimental spaces, but it's a really good question whether you should have an experimental space in the contemporary section, or whether you should really, because then you're sort of drawing this line between, okay, that's all new stuff and that's all old stuff, and never the twain shall meet, and that's sort of not really the message that the Met wants to get behind.
I wasn't thinking of it so much in that way as maybe not a media lab, but just this maybe something more specifically devoted to that pursuit for the medium, for the ideas of those mediums,
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a need for the Met to do more contemporary art stuff, because all of a sudden they're going to have a lot more space to do it in. That's probably all I'm allowed to say out loud. Yeah. There's still lots of planning going on.
You have a question? I had a question for Sean. In terms of, I'm Linda Law, I'm a holographic artist, and we're in a very interesting phase right now. An actual holographic, definition is a hologram is a recording of an interference pattern of light, but we can't make holographic recordings, really true holographic recordings yet. We're at least 10 years away from that. MIT Lab and other places are working on that. But what you're doing is really interesting, and I think we have a whole load of hybrid devices that are evolving right now. So from my understanding, though, you're building that up from slices, correct? So in terms of how are you creating that data? I mean, if you're taking a 3D model in Studio Max or Maya, how do you generate those slices? And because there's a holographic company, I know there's actually building holograms that way too, real true holograms that way, but they're essentially only small amounts of animation. We can do 10 seconds. We can't do full animation. So this hybrid area, and I write about this, I have a blog about this too, so I am interested in talking to you more about this too. But that interface and how those images get constructed is really interesting. So if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. Right, so definitions of hologram versus volumetric, really tough. If those that know me know that I would refuse to call what we're doing holographic for the longest time. I refer to it as volumetric. I want to make it very clear, I want to make it very academic, I want to make it very truthful, because you'll have the light folks will say, oh, there's a hologram of Tupac on stage, when in fact it's just a reflection. Yeah. Very simply, a 2D reflection. And so I came up with this idea of calling it a voxy. A voxy is a volumetric motion picture. So movie is a motion picture shortened, and a voxel is a volume picture. Put vox and movie together, create this whole kind of thing to get around not calling things holographic. I guess there's two ways you could define holographic. Holographic image, so the whole image. So in that definition, one could say that, unlike the Tupac thing, that we do show a whole image. You can walk all the way around it. You can see this. Which actually some unless you have one of the tubular holograms, you can't go behind the hologram. So it's different. But anyway, but right, a hologram or laser hologram is about interference patterns. And actually, there's some new thing. Philips, you may have seen it. Philips with some other company has created this thing specifically for heart surgery or something like that, where apparently, I need to learn more about it, maybe you'll know, or we'll look at it together, is doing hologram interference pattern based video interactivity. I just saw it this month. So it's like our competition. I'm sure it's $100,000 or whatever, at least. But so this stuff is moving really fast. There's a huge interest in this, right? But anyway, how are the images created? If you're familiar with 3D printing, it's actually very similar in a sense. the 3D printer will print out like these layers. You start from the bottom and you'll print the person's feet, and then you go around and you'll print their ankles and their knees and their thighs and their torso all the way up until you build their head, lines and lines and lines. So you can take an image, maybe one of the scans from, by the way, I couldn't believe that you pronounced photogrammetry?
Photogrammetry?
I've never heard someone pronounce that. I've tried to pronounce it, and it's so incredible. But anyway, say it again.
Photogrammetry. Photogrammetry, ladies and gentlemen.
So you can use photogrammetry, which I'm now conversant in, to take many pictures and to produce a 3D model, which may be like an OBJ file, or which is like an object file. Basically, a number of points, polygon, like vertices in space, which have color on them. And then you could basically do a file conversion to something called an STL, or which is what a 3D printer would do, and that's basically it's just the slices out. That's the simple way of speaking of it. How do we actually do it is really effing hard, and like luckily we had this guy, Ken, who could do it to such a degree and so fast and without all the latency, all these problems that we have. But it's math, I guess would be the simplest way. But we can show the inside of things too. We actually have a demo is like a car, and there's the car seats inside the car, and so it's you can see through things if you wanted to. Most of the things we just draw on the outside, but it's sort of an interesting medium in that it is totally transparent.
Isn't occlusion an issue though for you too?
Right, it's also a feature. It is a non-occluding display if you want it, which means you could see through things. Which could be helpful in health or whatever. Yeah, I mean, where occlusion is an issue, we theoretically, we really are just getting to the level where we're actually seeing it. Theoretically, it's like a problem, but when you're actually playing a game that has maybe an aesthetic to it where this complements it, does anyone really notice? And so far, it hasn't been a problem.
Are there other questions?
This one's for Don, actually. My name is Ron. I'm with a company called Sketchfab, and we're a web platform for displaying 3D models online interactively. And you mentioned Unity before, but with us, you don't need a plugin or anything like that. And we'd love to talk to you maybe later about working together about something.
Oh yeah,
you
totally.
Could literally load up all those scans, all the models, and display them interactively. So artwork, whatever.
Yeah, man, it's all there. You can totally have it.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like Sketchfab.
Yeah. That's all.
Other questions? Well, I have a question for Allison. And the question I wanted to ask when I was looking at your work, because everybody's like, 3D models and stuff, but also a lot of people here in this room are very practice-based. So I really wondered, after you put on something in such a situation like Impact, where do you see being able to do that kind of performance in which you're not given 700 lines to the 800 lines to the 7th largest supercomputer in the United States? MPAC has that, all those facilities. I remember that when I was up there. Where do you see that going? I mean, how that could work for you?
When I was first conceiving of the show, it's basically I made this proposal to MPAC, and I was told make the proposal higher than they would ever agree to, and they agreed to everything. And I was kind of screwed when they did that. But I was trying to figure out a show that would exploit the resource, take advantage of the resources at MPAC, but also something that was configurable and portable, transportable to another space. And so I think that it is. There's things with MPAC that they have really fancy kind of $30,000 projectors, and so everything looked really beautiful. But it definitely can be in a warehouse space. It could be on a theater stage blocked off, because I don't know if I didn't get to really talk about it, but there's this metal angel that's on a fly system that's jumping into a ball pit over and over again. So it'd be great to have a fly system with it, but it could be handled in different ways. And so the show really is configurable, and the thing is, like, with processing and the way it's networked, in theory, you can just press play and everything runs, this whole huge show with all these different installations. And at MPAC, I think it was 5 different computers that I was using, but you know, it's really more of a matter of having a space where I can be there for a while to install, and the more money and production team there is, the faster that goes. But it could be done more simply as well.
For those of you who don't know, MPAC, which is up on the campus of Rensselaer Polytechnic in Troy, is Electronic Media Performing Arts Center, and it is so state-of-the-art. And I went to the opening of it a few years ago, and at that time they said it had 800 computer feed lines into the 7th largest supercomputer in the country. So, and they have artist residencies, they have different labs, so it's something we don't have that level here in New York City. But to be able to put on production at MPAC is like, it doesn't get any better than that for state-of-the-art. So it's really daunting to be able to do something like that. And that's why I was curious on how Allison could port it over, because, you know, once you're given, you know, the Lamborghini of performing arts, you know, then what? How do you go from there? So that was my question.
I have a suggestion for a location. You know, you've heard of the High Line. Well, these people have this project, the Low Line. They're taking over the tram yards, so they're by Delancey, by the bridge. They're going to build an underground park. They're going to use fiber optics to bring in light and so on. But it's a big space, and it would work.
Yeah. And you had a...
Well, I was just curious, when you made this proposal, how much assistance, how much were you able to get in terms of, you know, assistance for bringing the project to fruition?
Yeah, but before the install time, there wasn't really support. There's a lot of production meetings preparing for the install time, but then I think it was 7 days of install time, and then two days for these performances that were open to the public. And so during those 7 days, I had really incredible production support from like 9 to 5. Or I guess over 5 days. So, and then there were also resources at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute with offering kind of equipment grants, and other professors that I was working with, like building the Angel, making sure that it wasn't going to, you know, kill anyone. And so, yeah, they're really, again, MPAC is really great, and the people there are brilliant and really kind. So if you have a chance to visit or do a residency there, it's amazing. So
any last questions? Okay, well, thank you, and we'll leave it for breakout now.